All right, we're live. This is Hangops for November 21st, 2014. Uh, and we are going to recap Lisa 2014. It happened. It was in Seattle. There were some talks. The end. There you go.
Well, I think that we're going to have to because I don't think anybody from uh, Lisa that actually went to Lisa is here. I heard good things. Like, I know a bunch of my coworkers were there, but
Yeah,
um,
looks like the few people that were going to try to make it can't, so I guess we'll have to go with it happened. It was good. There was breakfast cereal, there were talks, there was training, there were neckbeards,
there were stickers.
there were stickers, there were many yaks shaved.
Yes, these stickers have made an appearance. Let's see. Ah, there we go. And in keeping with Chris's sticker theme, let's see if I can find making their first actual appearance. I had some of those made for SysAdvent.
Cool.
Nice.
And we did a logo rebuild. Um, those are the new Schnazzy stickers. Keeping with, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of the tiny stickers because I like tiny laptops. And the super rare, only a few individuals will get these, the contributor stickers. So, yay randomness, right?
Nice. So what is this admin?
Um, did you say when is or what is? Because I can explain
What is
both.
it?
SysAdvent is it's an advent calendar of systems administration topic or blog posts done every December. We're going on our 7th year, so there's just some awesome posts. Brandon, I think you're writing a post this year, right?
Supposedly. I should probably work on that this weekend. Yeah, no, I signed up to do an introduction to Kafka, and sort of bundled in there would be some intro stuff on Zookeeper.
Very cool. It's kind of interesting. So the neat part is the articles seem to carry like they're much longer lasting than I would have expected because I was going back like articles from 5 years ago, and they're still many of them are still very relevant because of either the topic is still relevant or they were culture related. Just a lot of great content. And luckily, my hope is always that I don't, or not always, but my hope is that I don't have to write any because that means that everybody that signed up to write one ended up writing one. Um, but yeah, and I think Paul, you actually were going to write, but gave up your slot. Is that right?
It
Props.
is. Yes, sir, that's correct. I was having a bit of trouble coming up with a topic, and there was a bunch of interesting ones down in um, the list of people that wanted a slot, so it made sense to give it up.
And I appreciate that because it's definitely something there. I think that that's something I'm learning more as I am around the community more often. More often. Yeah, my words are not coming out properly. As I've been around longer, I'm finding that that's a skill that I need to better develop. Is that I'm just going to take a step back and give other people an opportunity to do interesting things.
Yep. I have that same issue in like meetings and conversations in general. Is I tend to talk more than I listen, and I think that kind of goes throughout, right? So that's definitely one thing that I've been trying to work on, the last 3, 6 months.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think I would guess that you're not the only person that struggles with it. I know it's something I is a constant struggle for myself to take that step back and go, okay, what are people trying to communicate? What am I not listening to that I should be listening to? And what are the better ways that I can interact with folks? So yeah, since we don't have anyone here to talk about Lisa, kind of interesting. I've been playing a lot with. So for those that aren't familiar, the chef community site is called Supermarket, and we did an omnibus build of the supermarket, and I've been working on creating a resource for standing that up. It's been really kind of interesting, just all the test cases of, oh, can you actually allow the same thing to be defined twice and those kinds of things, and just a lot of stuff that I hadn't thought about before that has interesting implications on the way we as operators work. I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, interesting stuff. How about you, Brandon? What have you been working on this week?
Nothing. Well, nothing I would say terribly exciting, but good stuff. We are trying to sort of uh, systematize, I guess you could say, standardize our knock handoff process, whereby services sort of like go through a production acceptance process and are given to our knock and SRE team for the primary on-call. We're kind of trying to take that model, I guess, kind of from like Google has, where SRE level on-call has an acceptance process to it around like alerting, runbooks, documentation, engineering, docs, escalation, all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of did our first one for some services that we recently launched. Working on like slide deck and standardizing some of the stuff with that. Hey, Jerome.
Hi.
Hey, so Jerome was able to join. He was actually at Letha. Want to give us a rundown of what you were doing there and what you thought?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, first, Lisa was my first Usenix conference, and so when people told me, "Nah, we don't really want you to go to Lisa. We want you to go to reInvent," I say, "No, no way. I'm going to go to Lisa because that's where the really interesting and funny stuff will be." And so I was expecting some talks about Docker because Docker has been all over the place pretty much everywhere, which is great news for us at Docker. But interestingly, on the schedule there was nothing speaking about Docker directly. However, containers were like all over the place, but kind of as in some subtitles like everywhere. There were a couple of talks about CoreOS and Project Atomic, which kind of maybe reflects the fact that the preoccupations of people attending Lisa are more in line with sysadmin and ops things. So they care more about, okay, what's the distro that we're going to have under the hood? What are we going to put our containers on? And when you attend the talks, I mean, maybe half of the talks I was attending mention, well, name drop Docker at some point, like, oh, and by the way, we did deploy that stuff into Docker without even kind of bothering explaining why is it that we're becoming obvious. So that was pretty interesting. Um, and then the main topics I can't really make contrast with other editions of this since it was the first one I was attending. But there was definitely a different vibe from the usually more developer-oriented conferences that I was attending. You can see that there is a strong concern for, well, uptime and ops things, basically. And there were also a couple of interesting talks about kind of defending the craft of sysadmin, kind of to explain that, yeah, sure, now we have DevOps and now the developers can spin up VMs in cloud themselves, but sysadmins and ops are obviously still extremely useful, even if many people were acknowledging that there is a big shift, a big change in the way we do ops. Oh, yeah, sorry. So I have some bad background noise, but I'm actually already having a mic on those headphones. It's just that they are doing an announcement just next to me. It should be better now.
So it's interesting, like you're pointing out that difference between ops and dev, and the more more time I seem to spend in industry, I'm finding that those two, I'm not going to say converge because that's really not the word, but their responsibilities are very similar. or not similar, but their concerns are becoming more and more similar, whether they are doing different things. I'm curious. Do you think that with a lot of the move towards containerization, are we seeing any convergence of concerns, or do you think that ops is going to go off and do its thing, and dev is going to go off and do its thing, and we're going to start to see resurgence of more just over the wall kind of problems, or do you think this is going to help prevent us from just throwing code over the wall?
So I think that it is in smaller shops, and there was a very enlightening talk by Ben Rockwood explaining how he saw our job kind of changing, and he was kind of explaining that most shops now have a very small number of sysadmins and have to do with that, and devs end up doing stuff that used to be kind of the walled garden of sysadmins. So there is a change, but at the same time, the higher you grow, when you move to really large scale systems, you still end up having people doing, I wouldn't say exclusively sysadmin things, but doing things that are not really um, classical developer trade. And I think it's no wonder that Google, I think it's Google that came initially up with the term of SRE, which is this kind of, for me, has always been this kind of, SRE is kind of ops scale or something like that, because beyond a given point, you're not going to just be SSHing around and fixing little things and crafting little scripts. You have to do stuff at scale, and so you need to have a lot more dev skills than just the sysadmin that knows how to put things together. So that's probably part of the change that we see. Large-scale systems that are more and more common, probably thanks to cloud, because now everybody can be like heading a fleet of a couple of hundreds of VMs. So we are probably seeing that happening, and so I don't really think that the job of sysadmin or ops is in danger, but things are shifting significantly. Um,
That makes a bit of sense. Like I can understand that. It's just going to be interesting to see how many of these tasks end up being performed one direction and the other and whatnot, and how much bleed over. Because I've found, at least in my roles as sysadmins, when I've worked with teams that were doing web operations-y stuff, like digging into the front end code made a huge difference. Or I guess back end code, depending on how you looked at it, but digging into the code base was a thing that we did regularly, and yeah, I forget where I was going with that, but you get the idea. It'll be interesting to see how those things mix as the years go on.
Yeah, I think ideally these things mix through, or they get encapsulated in sort of, what we refer to as like the platform or like the fabric or the substrate, right? Like, and that the role of operations is sort of building platforms that developers can use in a self-service manner. It's certainly something that Mark Imbriaco and Ben Rockwood have both touched on a lot. And that's kind of the future of ops, and like sort of things that look maybe a little bit like platform as a service type level abstractions. That's kind of where I see things moving is building automation at these different levels. And as we talked about last week, with a lot of the announcements coming out of reInvent, a lot of the new product offerings from AWS are those higher level encapsulations, right? It's like, it's store your code, it's deploy your code, it's that continuous integration, continuous deployment lifecycle. It's to the right, AWS Lambda, right, is like the highest level abstraction. It's like you put some Node.js code, in this out into the cloud, right? And it just stuff gets triggered. You're billed by like the 100 milliseconds. I mean, it doesn't get much more abstract than that. So I think a lot of what future role for ops is going to be understanding what abstraction layers are available and having a strong sense of, do I build or do I buy? Like maybe sometimes we talk about multi-cloud. So maybe, you use cloud providers at the most basic, infrastructure as a service level, where you're just getting compute, networking, block storage, maybe like some like load balancing and security features. But that's it, so that you can, you can work across Google Cloud, Azure, Rackspace, AWS, or maybe you decide that I don't have a reason to invest in that. I'm going to be tap more into the AWS ecosystem higher level and be like multi-region but not multi-cloud. And so many use stuff like RDS or OpsWorks or Beanstalk or some of the the highest level stuff like code deploy and code commit and code pipeline. So I think that's going to be a lot of the future, and that's even like a little bit where I'm at. As we look at we're building our service deployment stuff. It's like what are these new things do we want to tap into versus sort of building our own stuff with things like Rundeck and Chef and just Ruby code and so on.
Makes sense. And like, I think that's kind of another interesting thing is so many of the development paradigms. Jerome, thank you very much for joining us. For those that are listening to this on the audio, he just mentioned that in chat that he's headed off on a plane. So, but that's kind of this interesting paradigm, right? Like we're starting to see more and more that need to pay attention to the development practices around modularity and the way they think about problem sets. And it's fun for me to watch because there's this weird like paradox, right? We need the developers to better understand how things work in an operational sense. Like the number of times that we've seen code come across and it's like, why would you ever do that? That is horrible. Well, it's because they don't understand. The author of that code did not understand that disk isn't always available. You can't just assume that you can actually write to disk or that it won't fill up. On the flip side, I think we as operations professionals are starting to find and learn things about how what we need to be doing with the way we build out infrastructure is build it in pieces. We talk a lot about microservices, which I have my own qualms with, but that idea, right, of I should be able to reason about where I'm making decisions and where I'm committing myself from an infrastructure level and be able to swap in and out components as necessary and build abstractions on top of that as appropriate. Like there's been a lot of talk about the idea of locking into Amazon, and like traditionally that's kind of the way it is an IT role, right? Like I always laugh when everybody's like, oh, well, you don't want to lock into Amazon or you don't want to lock into this, and it's like, okay, so tell me about that Oracle thing or that PeopleSoft thing or that Windows Active Directory thing or what did you decide to deploy for your desktops? Like it's all about managing risk and managing complexity instead of focusing on we're making this decision because Big Blue told us to make that decision type things. Or does someone think I'm crazy? Do you think we should just be like, oh, Cisco is the only network vendor, we should do all Cisco?
No, I think you're right. I think that anytime we choose to, quote unquote standardize, we are creating a certain amount of lock-in. I think that some of the tools available today can let us avoid some of that lock-in if we want to choose like to build more abstractions. Things like configuration management, Docker. some of the libraries, things like Fog and some of these other sort of cloud agnostic, code libraries can let us build our automation in a way where we can be portable amongst clouds. Especially if you focus on only consuming like the lowest level sort of IaaS building blocks. But I do think most organizations don't have the engineering, especially the operations engineering, either time, in a lot of cases, just know-how to like only consume the lowest level building blocks and then have the rest and then build the rest. You know what I mean? I think like the reality is that there's a time and talent that simply isn't there. You know what I mean? They need to ship things, and so they're going to consume those things. And so realistically, the risk of that level of lock-in to them is like it's not as high as I think it's sometimes painted out to be. But I kind of understand where some folks are coming from. But I do think sometimes the level of effort that it actually takes to be like say like IaaS agnostic is sometimes lost in the discussion.
Well, and I always go back to thinking about the network gear example. So one of my previous employers, UC Riverside, they only buy Cisco gear. It's not because Cisco is the cheapest. It's not because Cisco's the best. It's because they all know Cisco. It's a pretty standard interface, and frankly, for the campus the size that it is, there are a total of 4 technical network engineers. When you're supporting a campus that size, 4 engineers is supporting that big of a network. You can't decide that we're going to throw any random thing out there because you just don't have the staff time to support it. So you end up deciding, okay, well, we're going to standardize on Cisco because, well, frankly, we're not making the investment in humans that we need to be able to support more than just Cisco. On the flip side, if you're AOL, you are absolutely incentivized to do what they've done, and they've said, and I forget if it's 2 or 3, but they have a requirement of they will run only standard protocols and only run or run at least 1 or 2, or I'm sorry, 2 or 3 different vendors because, frankly, it's needed. They can't be put in a place where the vendors have that control over them because of how large their infrastructure is.
I think one of the challenges is as those of us who are more senior or have had the opportunity to have the engineering and operations sort of time and budget to do these abstractions, to be multi-cloud, to build that stuff. We need to share that information and I think share what is the level of effort to give folks that are facing that sort of a chance to learn from our experiences. Now, Jake, I know recently you've been working on right. You're moving some stuff into AWS from another one of the big cloud vendors. You don't have to do.
Yeah.
But it's not I don't think you guys are trying to be multi-cloud, but you are doing sort of a cloud migration. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, we have currently everything's hosted on Metal, and we're trying to migrate everything to AWS. And we're gonna be doing this over a set period of time, and definitely after Q4 is all done. But right now we're just planning everything out and getting ready to make all this migration just really seamless.
Now, as you're making those kinds of moves, where are you finding your biggest pain points? Are you finding what abstractions are hard to deal with?
To be honest, I don't know. We have actually delegated this one guy to. He's doing all the AWS research and all the AWS scaling issues. Right now, that we're just considering our limitations on our app and how we're going to put that into different AWS instances, how we're going to kind of plan it all out, and where we're going to have everything put together.
Very cool.
In terms of initial consumption, are you looking at sort of like just the basic like VMs, networking, maybe some block storage, or are you also trying to see like could we maybe use ELBs instead of like HA proxy, or some of the like RDS instead of like our own MySQL or Postgres, or like how much of like a forklift versus like build it better as we migrate our or build it in like a way of like let's use this abstraction and relieve ourselves of some management overhead sort of like approach.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that we can lighten our load would be excellent. So we're definitely looking at like RDS instances and ELBs over hot proxy, and just trying to make any load that we have kind of forklift into AWS, make that whole transition easier.
Okay, I gotta stop us for just a second because you did something there. Okay, how many people call it HA proxy and how many people call it HA proxy? Because to me, it's HA proxy because we're talking about HA, like highly available. Not HA, like, haha, it's a proxy. Sorry, couldn't help myself.
That's one of the problems of like only reading things and never hearing about them.
There are people that pronounce it HA proxy. Like, you're not the only person. In fact, like, I feel like there was someone I heard the other day that I was like, oh my god, that person pronounces it that way. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong.
We have a guy on our team that pronounces it Redis as opposed to Redis, and there's different ways to pronounce everything.
Soon we were. I'm sorry. I can't talk, obviously. This very quickly devolves into the Java versus Java, I think. Is it? Yeah, like there are three different ways I've heard Java pronounced as well.
Yeah, is it Java or Java?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go ahead and admit for the first 3 or 4 years, this would be like 98 to 2002, I insisted it was Linux because Linus.
I can imagine.
And then eventually realized, no, it's Lin. But I'll admit that mark of shame. I think some of the other ones there is no official. However, it is GIF. I'm an authority on this, and it's GIF.
No, I'm just kidding. It's totally GIF. It's a hard G.
It's GIF. Yeah.
Because they're like GIFs, right?
They're GIFs. Yeah, a GIF for every occasion. GIF is peanut butter. Anyway, Pete, hello.
Hello, everyone. Glad I'm able to make it.
Well, that's another one. Speaking of Pete, is it Nagios or Nagios?
I don't know, because I just kill it and put Sensu in place.
It's Sinsu.
Sinsu. I actually remember, if you go way back to it's over 3 years ago now, when I remember when Sean came to me, he was like, I got this thing. He was like, trying to think about a name for it or whatever, and he thought of it as Sensu. And of course, what's the first thing you do? You got to go online and be like, what else out there is called Sensu? We started like trying to follow like the Sensu. Anytime someone said Sensu on Twitter, we try to follow it. And there's a club in Indiana called Sensu. I don't know if that's how they pronounce it, but it's like Sensu Club or whatever. And that was all of the tweets for Sensu was like some random club, and it's like every like Monday morning you'd see like the weekend of club pictures and whatnot. I'm like, oh man, we need some like better SEO on Sensu.
Nice. And like, in fact, that's got to be the hardest thing about the company I work for is that like our SEO is horrible. But yeah, and it always gets me thinking about other things that, now that I work for Chef, are not appropriate for me to talk about. So yeah.
I only think of it's ops code. Ops code till I die, man.
Ops code till you. The repos I work on all say ops code.
So Pete, I know you were at reInvent, but did you follow Lisa at all?
I didn't. I mean, I followed it as much as I guess you could follow on the Twitters. one thing that I, from just a kind of casual observer on the Twitters, because it was the same time as reInvent, and I was kind of like, Twitter bankruptcy from that. But it did look like a pretty awesome event. I think the organizers did an amazing job, because I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I kind of like think of Lisa and Usenix as like kind of dying conferences, and from what I saw and the talks that people were talking about and things like that, I mean, it totally like I'm whatever the next Lisa is, I'm gonna get there. So massive kudos to all the organizers. Like, I really thought it was a dead conference. So that's it's a great achievement for them, and I can't wait. I'm going to the next one. So.
Very nice. And someone actually made it to Lisa just joined us.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, what's up? Welcome.
Thanks. I actually just tuned into the stream and heard everyone mispronouncing Nagios, so I had to jump on to correct you. Paperless Post gets it right. They call it nachos.
I love that.
Fun.
With that.
So Nathan, do you call it HA proxy or do you call it hot proxy?
Oh, it's totally HA proxy. But Lisa, yeah, I was at Lisa. Lisa's a good conference.
Was there a theme this year?
I don't know.
What would you say the theme was from your experience? Because you gave a training session, right?
Yeah, I did a tutorial on, this might be hard to believe. I gave a tutorial on Chef. So that was fun. Talked a lot about testing your infrastructure and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it was really a good conference. There was a lot of, like Pete was saying, there was a lot of good talks. There are a lot of folks from academia that are there, but the thing about academia is you want to learn, and people are there to learn and try new things and get new insights, which I thought was really good. I had a great time at one of the BOFs. Of course, there are always BOFs. I went to the Testing Your Infrastructure BOF, and I actually had a fun troll of everyone. So they were going around the room asking what sort of testing you do and why you do testing of your infrastructure code. And so I was the last one that got to answer the question, and I said testing is bullshit. What you should do is use Nagios, because monitoring is the only thing that really matters. That went over really well in the room.
How quickly did you have to run out with the pitchforks and the flaming torches behind you?
It actually wasn't so bad. There were a couple of people that were really, really angry that I said that. And then there were a couple of people that were just in my class like the day before where I taught everyone about how to test their infrastructure code. So half the room knew it was a complete troll. But the other half, I think totally wanted to argue with me. It was fun.
As a note, anytime he's doing classes, just so that everybody in the Twitter sphere knows, he likes for his phone to blow up. So you should always be tweeting at Nathan Harvey when you know that he's giving a class.
Yeah, that was fun because Chris is right. When I give talks at conferences or when I teach classes, I do leave my phone on because I'm never on call anymore, and I have empathy for those of you that are on call on a regular basis and get interrupted by your phones while you're doing important things. So I always leave my phone on, and of course I mentioned that, or Chris knew it, and he might have tweeted about it. He might have posted it in our HIP chat while I was live streaming my class, and one of my coworkers might have decided to see if I would be as good at ignoring my phone ringing as I was at ignoring it blowing up while people were tweeting at me. So I did receive a phone call in the middle of class, which I did ignore, but that was certainly fun.
Hey man, you're not supposed to ignore when the knock calls. But I guess it wasn't the knock, so it doesn't matter, right?
So were there any talks that you were like mind-blown.gif about?
So I didn't go to, but I did look at the slides of Theo's talks, or Theo's talk, Theo/Nichols' talk, that was all about math and monitoring and metrics. and I looked at his slides and I felt dumber. So I had wished that I had gone to his talk. Like I felt inadequate because I didn't know all the maths. And I think his talk was. I mean, I heard good things about his talk. I had wished I'd gone to it. And of course, Ben Rockwood, as always, an excellent talk from him as well.
I had a question, but it's gone now.
I think it was what was Ben Rockwood's talk about? Because I have already forgotten, just because too many things happen these days.
Yeah, is there a stream of that I can catch up on?
This is a good question.
So Lisa is very good about publishing videos of most of the sessions online. So just wait for it, and they will come. In fact, you can go watch old sessions. I still, to this day, there is and I think I listened to the audio, but we were at Coffee Ops. Was it last week, Brandon, or the week before?
Yeah, that was last week.
Yeah, last week, and I was quoting a talk from like 2005 or no, 2008.
Yeah.
And that's still available if you want to go watch it. So yeah, the Lisa archives are like kept in perpetuity. It's kind of neat. And then you can actually go read the papers because there are lots of actual academic papers about like systems administration stuff.
So as I've probably noted before, I thought Lisa was a dead conference. I guess for a non-Lisa attendee, what were, in the hallway track, what are the conversations that people are talking about, right? So, I feel like you go to a Velocity or a DevOps Days or a Surge, and it's kind of the hipster, the new hotness, and things like that. As I know from previous experience, academia and large institutions don't move as fast as some of us do. So, are people just now kind of getting into some of, some new things? Are they, getting into cloud finally? Maybe like their management's finally broken down and be like, no, cloud is okay. SaaS services are okay. Like, what were some of the more interesting kind of hallway track conversations that people had?
Yeah, I think a lot of the hallway track conversations that I was either part of or had overheard as I was walking around were people talking about like some of the challenges that they're starting to come to as scale is growing a little bit. They were talking a lot about monitoring and like how do we make sure that we're monitoring the right things? What do we know to monitor? Certainly a lot about automation and testing. So yeah, I think it's maybe not as cutting edge as some of the other conferences that you go to, but people are talking about real problems and certainly also talking about real problems with sort of organizational aspects of how do we run IT, how does IT work together with the business, and so forth.
Was there lots of Docker?
There was lots of Docker.
Have we reached peak Docker yet? Is it too soon? Do we need another year?
I think peak Docker follows peak Chesslock, so
that sounds about right.
Not quite there.
Speaking of peak Chesslock, what were you up to at reInvent?
Oh man, reInvent. So as some might know, I actually started at a new company here this summer after taking a little bit of time off called ThreatStack. And when I came on board, we were in a closed beta. We didn't have anything kind of like publicly available to use. So the thing that I've actually been working on, which is probably why my Twitter posts have gone downhill in velocity since I started here, has basically building out our SaaS infrastructure around our ThreatStack continuous security monitoring thing. So our big goal was actually getting to reInvent so we could ship that out, our GA release. But kind of one of the cool things, we had 12 of the 18 employees out there because we actually got picked to be one of the 5 companies that got to launch as part of like the Amazon like startup thing, which was pretty cool. So our founder and our VP of engineering got up on stage with Werner Vogels, and got to do like a 5-minute launch, and it was pretty cool. So yeah, so it feels good to finally get stuff out there. So you should check it out. You can go and download it, or well, download the agent and do some stuff and things. It's pretty neat, but I guess I'm biased.
What does it do?
So
tell me why I should buy your product.
Why buy my database? Actually, no database this time. So it's pretty neat, actually. It's I guess we're calling it continuous security monitoring. So we have a really lightweight agent written in C that lives on all of your hosts, and what it does is it talks to public kernel APIs, so no kernel modules or anything like that. And we basically capture all the syscalls on the system. Probably familiar with other tools like that do this stuff, like auditd, OSSec. If you've ever had to deploy OSSec, then you'd probably have felt that pain before. But so basically, our tool just captures all activity on the system, and then it all sucks up to our SaaS application, which I help run, and we do lots of cool analytics and stuff on it. So kind of answering the question of who did what when. Some of the people we were chatting with at reInvent were more security, and so they were like the incident responders, and they were the ones that like, I need something because we're gonna get hacked. But the reality is, and I'm sure you'll see many talks at conferences next year on this one, is that I actually look at it like, as an ops person, it's great because I want to give as many people access to production as we can because I want them to own their stuff, but I want to trust but verify. So how do I create rules that say, all right, well, you can have access, but if you touch this like secret key on the web servers, then I want an alert. How do I know if like someone touched a file or edited the file, or if someone tries to make this connection? But so it's pretty cool, and it's a wealth of data that we're able to capture, which is pretty neat. So we're already kind of thinking about future features, and how do we take all this data and show you cool stuff with it. So so if you're at all interested in kind of seeing what your servers are doing, check it out. You can download it. I think it's like 5 free agents for 15 days or something like that. So it's all wide open now. So no more closed, secret, stealth beta, whatever they call them nowadays. We're just a company now.
Very nice.
So what cool stuff is everyone else playing around with?
Lots of supermarket, but kind of interesting, and not really something I'm playing with yet, but paying attention a little bit, and this is funny because I work for a chef now, but did everyone see that Puppet 4, they announced they're going to do, I think they're calling it AIO packages or all-in-one packages?
Like Omnibus?
Yeah, well, not gonna lie, I did joke to a coworker who was like, "Dude, they're omnibusing all the things." But yeah, basically, it's like Omnibus, so that they can control Ruby and all that jazz. There were some interesting discussions around, like, where does Factor play into that, and how they're going to, like, how you upgrade things in between and whatnot. But just interesting to see more software going that way of, the support life cycle of things like CentOS 5 and CentOS 6, RHEL 5, RHEL 6, and supporting older language runtimes is way hard. And of course, if you've ever come from the Solaris background, or if you're in a RHEL environment and you've ever played with changing the system Python, or in Solaris changing the system Perl, like that there are tiers ahead. Like omnibusing things is just awesome for that purpose as well. So it's kind of cool to actually see them doing that.
Yeah, I've had many a heated discussion with sysadmins around Omnibus. I feel like it's one of those things you either love it or you hate it. You probably hate it because you're thinking like, oh well, the OS should totally have packages that you should use, and you should use upstream packages. which is true if OS like upstream packages didn't suck most of the time. But and then there's the other side of people who are like, I love this. It solves a huge problem for me. I've used it for. I mean, the best thing I ever actually did with Omnibus was working at a place that had a lot of Python people and a lot of hate for Ruby, which I don't know. I don't have enough hatred for really anything, so I don't never understand that kind of stuff. And they're like, we need like this very specific version of Python, but we can't install it because there's Python 2.6 on the servers, and we need 3 something, and I don't really know much about Python. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just create an Omnibus package. And so it was like my grandest, like, I'm just going to use Ruby to solve your Python problem. And yeah, I gave him Omnibus Python. So whatever gets the job done.
And
So
for me, go ahead, Ray.
Speaking of peak Docker and Omnibus, I'm going to give a shout out to at Lucis, John Vincent, over at what's Dell now, because he put up a GitHub repo, which I'll tweet out as well, that is a bunch of Docker templates for building Omnibus packages across a bunch of distros. It's something he got the idea from a Flapjack project, which is sort of some interesting, new take on monitoring and alerting stuff. But yeah, he put up a repo that makes it super easy to roll your Omnibus inside Docker and then also spit out Docker containers of your Omnibus stuff. So kind of wrapping it all up into one nice little deployment artifact. So simplify. There's some cool stuff coming out there that help it sort of simplifies this using these kind of tool chains.
I think that's one of the best parts of it is that I could go through the process of getting upstream packages built, and it's like, and ain't nobody got time for that. I mean, the ultimate goal is how can I effectively unblock the people who are blocked, right? Like, how can I solve a problem and move on? And tools like this and the people that are putting in a lot of time around them. I know, obviously, a great shout out to Lucis because he actually helped me big time with, I needed an Omnibus package for collectd because of some conflicting package that I didn't want to cause some issues with, and I was able to grab his fork. He had most of the work done. I made a couple of edits, and it just worked. So it's great to hear that he's got even some more stuff out there around it, because it's something that when you're in a bind, I mean, Omnibus is just the best thing that you could ever use.
Well, and I think it actually this gets into some really interesting discussions about kind of the larger body of knowledge and the different experiences that we've all had, and really how varied systems administration actually is. Because the way I grew up, if you will, we compiled everything. Like, I came from Solaris environments, and every time we installed what is it called? You name it, whether it was Apache or Perl, like, you downloaded the tarball and you installed the C compiler and you compiled that on the box. And for many people that have grown up in Linux land, that's not the case. And if you've grown up in HPUX, AIX land, where compiling is just a no-no for those particular platforms, you didn't actually compile things, that was horrible. You always used vendor packages. It's an even different world. And I think, and the same is true for Solaris too, right? I think that a lot of people come from that world as well, and it's interesting to see that we oscillate on ideas, right? The fact that, oh yeah, I'm just going to compile my own Apache because I can. Versus, well, let's use an Omnibus package so that we're in between. We're going to compile Apache so that we have the same Apache everywhere, and or we have the same version of Perl everywhere so that it doesn't stomp all over the system Perl. Those kinds of things, and it's really just kind of interesting to see kind of that in between.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, as we've moved now to all the systems look the same. Systems that differ from kind of the code, the infrastructure code we've written, should be dying off and they should be rebuilt. So since so many systems are looking the same, that's again where Omnibus is makes the most sense. There's no longer kind of the old school like, well, this system has this version of glibc and this has this version of that, and so I need to compile specifically to this system, or I'm using FreeBSD, so let me go to my tinderbox and let me compile just for those systems. We're trying to move towards this world where everything looks as similar as possible. And so in those cases, it's like, all right, well, I'm just going to compile this package one time. I'm going to pull in essentially the kitchen sink of libraries, and it's guaranteed to work, right? And you can even confirm that using all the great tools around Vagrant or Test Kitchen or whatever to say, all right, I'm using this specific version of Ubuntu or CentOS or whatever, and I'm going to take this package that's been compiled for it and ship it out. It's a huge benefit, that consistency. It's allowed. I mean, that's what I feel like has allowed so many companies to move so quickly and iterate so fast. It's like just that level of consistency versus the old days.
So true. Well, we are coming up on the hour. Was there anything anybody wanted to get in before we finished up?
Yes. AWS Advent. The other Advent calendar that you should be paying attention to. So, in addition to being crazy enough to submit to sysadvent, I volunteered to run my own Advent, bringing back one that I did in 2012, where I wrote 18 of the 24 posts myself because I was insane and learning about. What's funny is it was like the weekend before, December, I guess Thanksgiving, my father-in-law, who's an old school software engineer, was visiting us, and I was explaining, he's like, what is cloud computing? And so I was explaining Amazon to him, and that got me thinking about, I should do an AWS Advent. And I was like, I bet people will help. And then I got a couple contributions near the end, but anyway. So I decided to bring it back this year because now I'm working on AWS again, and but focusing on getting contributions. And so we've gotten, I think I have 5 out of the 25 slots still open. I basically, I said, 15 or bust, and we got the 15. 3 of them touch on Docker-y things, 3 of them touch on CloudFormation-y things, but I think there's enough of that kind of stuff going on to that it's good. We got to Terraform. I'm going to do one on Zookeeper and Kafka in AWS, kind of building on my sysadmin one as an intro, just about instance sizing and some of that stuff. DynamoDB, SQL Server, IAM, all kinds of good stuff. So that's going to kick off same timeline as sysadvent, so you have 2 good things to check out. You just follow AWS Advent on Twitter to get the updates, or it's awsadvent.tumblr.com. So should be some good crossover. It's going to be, I think, a good season for winter blogging. Yeah.
Very cool.
Jake, do you want to give a shout out to Linux on the desktop?
It's here. I can feel it, Jake.
Yeah.
I can feel it.
2015 is the year. I'm actually going to go back.
Sorry, it's the year of Linux on the desktop or DevOps on the desktop?
Well, I'm actually provisioning my desktop with Chef, so
Nice.
it's kind of like a DevOps.
And Arch, right?
Yeah,
Arch
Arch
Linux.
Linux. So I'm bleeding edge, not quite leading edge of the DevOps Linux desktop.
Well, so I had some coworkers use Arch on their laptop, and every Monday morning they'd be like, "Hey, I'll be right back. I'm just going to update." And then 4 hours later, they'd pop back into IRC and be like, "Well, I did the update, and it broke my LVM, and I don't know." It was always hilarious, but yeah.
Yeah, my first job was a C++ developer, and we all were forced to use Gentoo. And so, there was the occasional Monday morning you would have to come in and merge your whole fucking system, and it sucked.
Oh, there goes our rating.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just kidding. We don't have a rating.
We don't have a rating.
I don't even know where we are on iTunes. Shout out to Dave Coronel, who we haven't seen here in a while, who graciously maintains all the stuff that makes the podcast things work. I don't really know what happens. There's just podcast feeds. hopefully he'll be able to rejoin sometime soon. But big shout out to him for keeping that working. If you didn't know about that, you can go on hangops.com and there's links to you can get an audio only feed through iTunes or any kind of RSS, but there's like one click into iTunes stuff. So cool. I think unless anyone else has any shout outs they want to give, we can wrap it up there. All right.
I'll give one quick shout out, which is a cool thing. I actually learned about this from a friend of mine at Monitorama, actually, and I saw it at reInvent. It's called OSV. It's probably going to end up being, I don't want to say if it's going to be a Docker competitor, but maybe a little bit. But anyway, it's basically like, kind of containerized, cloud, whatever, application management stuff. So they were one of those companies that also launched with us out at reInvent, and they talked a lot about what they're doing. So you can go to their website, it's just osv.com, but it's some seriously cool stuff. Check it out. That's my shout out. It's awesome. Go there.
Cool. Well, thanks to ThreatStack and Chef for sponsoring. I assume the checks are in the mail.
On their way.
All right. Cool.
Speaking of Monitorama shout-outs, I want to make a shout-out to Jason Dixon. Hooked me up with one of his Monitorama hoodies the other day in Vegas, and I got back to Austin and it was 30 degrees, so it's had some use.
Did you win the food challenge? How'd you do?
We did okay. We misjudged the competition a little bit, which is a bit of a weak source excuse, but we did all right. Both dishes we did were the best versions of those dishes we've made, so we were stoked with what we did.
That's awesome.
And then I won $500 on a penny slot machine, so that was awesome.
There you go. Forget the food thing. Got to win some pennies,
Awesome. Speaking of Monitorama, I think the CFP is going to open soon, so if you don't, go follow Monitorama on Twitter and keep an eye out for that.
Have they announced the next one?
It's not official yet. It's the worst kept secret is it's going to be in Portland 2015, but it's probably any day now.
Probably Marchish, Portland.
Very cool.
I thought it was up on Lanyard.
I don't know. Anyway, I think I'm going to try to get to that. Probably that and Surge might be what I do next year, and then maybe Chef Conf. We'll see. Trying to stick into mostly West Coast for now. But cool. So we'll wrap it up with Monday, since next week is Thanksgiving holiday in the U.S. And I'm going to be in a coma, sleeping while all the insane people are shopping on Friday. We're doing a special Hangops on Monday. Got a couple SREs from LinkedIn and then a couple folks from other places talking about Kafka in production. So that'll be Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So that should be really cool. So we'll see some of you, all of you maybe on Monday, and have a good weekend.
Awesome. We'll see you.
See you guys.